Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars change from streaks of light back to tiny dots. The journey from the dark space between galaxies was finally over. Behind him, thousands of human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They had been gone for 800,000 years, but now they were home. The Galactic Council had thrown them out long ago. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable. The Council wanted peace and order. They said humans brought nothing but war and chaos. So they forced every human to leave. They pushed them out into the empty darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. But humans were stubborn. They did not die in the cold void like the Council expected. Instead, they learned. They grew stronger. They became something new. Lisa Carter commanded the entire human fleet from her massive flagship. She was an admiral now, leading millions of people back to their old home. Her first message to the Council was simple and direct. "This is Admiral Carter of the human fleet. We have returned. We want our place back in the galaxy. We demand 3 star systems to call home." The response came quickly from the Council's main world. It was not what humans hoped to hear. Ambassador Zektar appeared on the communication screen. He was a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. His voice was full of mockery and disbelief. "Humans? We thought you were all dead. You abandoned civilization 800,000 years ago. Now you think you can just come back? How amusing." The alien laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. Behind him, other Council members whispered and pointed at the screens showing the human fleet. They looked at the ships with confusion and slight worry. "You may have one small system on the galaxy's outer edge," Zektar continued, "but you will follow strict rules. No more than 1 million humans total, no advanced weapons, no expansion beyond your assigned borders." Helen Brooks was humanity's chief diplomat. She had spent decades preparing for this moment. Her response was calm, but carried an edge that made the Council members stop laughing. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. That was not a request for negotiation. That was us telling you what we are taking." The Council chamber fell silent. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had spoken to them with such confidence. They were used to being obeyed without question. Dr. Brooks continued speaking, her voice steady and clear. "We are taking 3 systems. Good systems with habitable worlds and resources. You can agree to this arrangement or we can take them anyway." Zektar's blue face turned darker with anger. "You dare threaten the Galactic Council? We rule over 10,000 species across 1 million worlds. What can a handful of primitive humans do against us?" The answer came from deep space scanners that began beeping frantically throughout the Council station. Morden, the Council's best intelligence officer, stared at his readings with growing alarm. The numbers made no sense. "Sir," Morden called out, his voice shaking. "The human ships, their energy signatures are impossible. Their technology readings are beyond our understanding." Zektar dismissed the report with a wave of his hand. "Impossible? They have been living in empty space like savages. How could they develop anything we do not already know?" But other Council members were starting to look worried. The scanner reports kept coming in, each one more disturbing than the last. The human ships were not just advanced. They were operating on principles that Council science could not explain. Jake Morrison smiled as he watched the confusion spread through the Council forces. His ship's systems were detecting their scans and panic. The Council was finally beginning to understand that something had changed. During the long exile, humans had not been alone in the dark. The space between galaxies was not empty. Ancient things lived there, beings older than stars, creatures that existed before the galaxy was born. Most species would have gone insane from contact with such entities, but humans were different. They adapted. They learned. They made alliances with things the Council could not even imagine. "Admiral Carter," Jake spoke into his communication device. "The Council seems surprised by our return. Should we give them a demonstration of what we learned out there?" Lisa Carter considered the question carefully. She had hoped the Council would be reasonable. 800,000 years was a long time to hold a grudge, but humans had very good memories. "Not yet, Captain Morrison. Let them think about our offer for a while. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is more powerful than any weapon." Back on the Council station, emergency meetings were already starting. Military commanders reviewed the scanner data again and again, hoping to find some explanation for what they were seeing. Grand Admiral Felnoth had fought in 100 battles across 50 different star systems. He had never seen anything like the human fleet. Their ships moved in ways that defied the laws of physics. Their energy sources were completely unknown. Even their hull materials registered as impossible combinations of elements. "How many ships do they have?" he asked his staff. "Current count shows 3,700 vessels, sir, but—" The scanner operator hesitated. "But what?" "Sir, some of the ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Our scanners cannot get accurate readings. There might be more ships that we simply cannot detect." The room fell silent. Multi-dimensional technology was theoretical at best. The Council's greatest scientists had barely begun to understand the concept. Yet these returning humans seemed to use it as easily as breathing. Helen Brooks waited patiently for the Council's response. She knew they were scared. The scanner readings would have told them enough to know that humanity was no longer the same species they had exiled. The dark space between galaxies had been a harsh teacher. Humans learned to survive in conditions that would kill most life forms. They encountered beings of pure energy, creatures that lived in the fabric of space itself, and ancient machines left behind by civilizations that died before the galaxy was young. Each encounter taught them something new. Each challenge made them stronger. Each alliance gave them knowledge that no Council species possessed. Mary Patterson was organizing the civilian ships that carried human families and their possessions. She had been born in exile, but her parents told her stories of the old galaxy, how she would see it for herself. "Are we really going to fight them if they refuse?" she asked Dr. Brooks over the communication channel. "We are going to take what belongs to us," Helen replied. "The Council made their choice 800,000 years ago. Now they will live with the consequences." The human fleet waited in perfect formation at the galaxy's edge. They had been patient for 8 centuries of millennia. They could wait a little longer for the Council to make their decision, but everyone knew the waiting would not last forever. The Council's answer came 3 days later. It was not the answer humans wanted to hear. "The Galactic Council rejects your demands," Ambassador Zektar announced over the communication channel. "You will accept our offer of one barren system, or you will leave our territory immediately." Admiral Lisa Carter closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had hoped it would not come to this, but she was not surprised. The Council had always been arrogant. Now they would learn the price of that arrogance. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter. Prepare for Demonstration Protocol Alpha. Target Kethmoran Military Shipyard." The choice of target was deliberate. Kethmoran was where the Council built their most powerful warships. It was also where they constructed the prison ships used to transport rebellious species to slave colonies. The facility was protected by over 200 Council vessels and was considered impregnable. Commander Alex Turner led the strike force. He commanded only 3 human ships against an entire fleet, but he was not worried. His ships were not the same vessels that had left the galaxy 800,000 years ago. "This is Commander Turner to Kethmoran Station. You have 10 minutes to evacuate all personnel. After that, we will destroy your facility." The response from the station commander was immediate and hostile. "This is Admiral Kolvek of the 3rd Defense Fleet. You are outnumbered 70-1. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick." Alex Turner smiled. The Council still thought in terms of numbers and conventional tactics. They had no idea what they were facing. "Time's up," Turner announced exactly 10 minutes later. The battle began with the human ships doing something impossible. They simply vanished from normal space, reappearing inside the enemy formation without traveling the distance between. The Council ships opened fire immediately, filling space with energy beams and explosive missiles. The weapons passed right through the human vessels as if they were ghosts, but the human return fire was devastatingly real. Turner's flagship fired a single beam of strange purple light. The beam touched the shields of a Council cruiser, and the entire ship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never been built. What kind of weapon was that? Admiral Kolvek demanded of his science officer. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors show no energy discharge, no explosion. The ship just stopped existing." The second human ship attacked differently. It fired what looked like small metal spheres at a group of Council destroyers. When the spheres made contact with the enemy hulls, they began to change the ships at a molecular level. The destroyers transformed into clouds of harmless gas in seconds. The third human vessel demonstrated the most terrifying capability of all. It created a field around itself that seemed to alter the laws of physics. Enemy missiles turned into flowers when they entered the field. Energy beams became streams of water. Solid metal hulls became transparent glass. Captain Dan Mitchell commanded the third ship. His crew had spent decades learning to manipulate reality itself from the void entities they had encountered in dark space. Physics are just suggestions. When you know how to ask nicely, he told his weapons officer, and we learned to ask very politely. The Council defenders tried everything. They coordinated attacks from multiple directions. They used their most powerful weapons. They attempted ramming maneuvers when their guns proved useless. Nothing worked. The human ships moved like living things, flowing around obstacles and attacks with impossible grace. They seemed to anticipate every move the Council forces made, responding to threats before they were even launched. Within 47 minutes, the entire Kethmaran facility was gone. 200 Council warships had been reduced to scattered atoms. The massive shipyard that had taken centuries to build was now empty space. The 3 human ships had not taken a single point of damage. Admiral Kolvek found himself alone in an escape pod, watching his entire fleet disappear. He activated his emergency beacon and waited for rescue, trying to understand what had just happened. The recordings of the battle spread throughout Council space within hours. Military commanders across the galaxy watched the footage again and again, hoping to find some weakness in the human tactics. They found none. Grand Admiral Felnoth called an emergency meeting of all Council military leaders. The conference room was filled with the galaxy's most experienced warriors, but fear was visible on every face. "How is this possible?" demanded General Vorthak of the Hegemony Marines. "Our intelligence said they were primitive refugees." The truth was becoming clear through intercepted human communications. During their exile, humanity had not simply survived in the void between galaxies. They had thrived. The space between galaxies was not empty. Ancient beings lived there, entities so old and powerful that they remembered the birth of the first stars. Most of these creatures were hostile to ordinary life, but humans had proven to be different. Instead of being destroyed by the void entities, humans had learned from them. They had formed alliances with beings of pure energy and creatures that existed outside normal dimensions. Dr. Susan Walsh had been humanity's leading expert on void space phenomena. Her research had led to weapons that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in small areas. "We did not conquer the dark," she had written in her reports. "We made friends with it." The Council's confidence was completely shattered. For thousands of years, they had been the supreme power in the galaxy. Their technology was advanced, their fleets were massive, and their authority was absolute. Now they faced an enemy that operated beyond their understanding. Human ships that could exist in multiple dimensions, weapons that changed reality itself, and tactical abilities that seemed almost supernatural. Emergency sessions were called on every Council world. Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly found themselves working together, united by their fear of returning humanity. Senator Veltara of the Crystalline Collective was one of the few voices calling for peace. "Perhaps we should reconsider their original demands. 3 systems is not unreasonable." But the Council leadership was too proud to admit defeat so quickly. They began mobilizing the largest military force in galactic history, pulling ships from every corner of their territory. Admiral Carter watched the Council preparations through her intelligence networks. Humans had allies now that the Council could not imagine. The void entities shared their knowledge freely, and that knowledge included perfect surveillance of the entire galaxy. "They are gathering 10,000 ships," reported her intelligence officer. "Good," Carter replied. "When they attack with everything they have and still lose, there will be no question about who rules this galaxy." Jake Morrison was coordinating with the civilian ships that carried human families. Many of them had been born in exile and had never seen the galaxy their parents remembered. "Are we really going to fight all of them?" asked a young woman named Amy Taylor. "We are going to show them what happens when you push humans into the dark and leave them there for 800,000 years, Jake replied. "They wanted us gone because they said we were too dangerous. They are about to learn they were right." The human fleet remained at the galaxy's edge, waiting for the Council's next move. But they were not idle. Ships that had seemed impossible were now revealing themselves as the outer scouts pulled back. The Council had seen 3,000 human vessels. The real number was closer to 50,000. most of them operating in dimensions that Council sensors could not detect. Humanity had come home, and they had brought friends that the galaxy was not ready to meet. The largest military force in galactic history assembled near the Andromeda Gateway. Over 10,000 ships from 50 different species formed a battle line that stretched across an entire star system. The Council had called in every favor, activated every alliance, and mobilized every available vessel. Fleet Admiral Ken Rodriguez watched the massive enemy formation from the bridge of his flagship. The Council fleet was impressive by any normal standard. Their ships gleamed in the starlight, bristling with weapons and shielded by the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. It would not be enough. The ultimatum came from Grand Admiral Fel Noth himself. His image appeared on every human ship's communication screen, backed by the authority of the entire Galactic Council. Humans of the Exile fleet, you are completely surrounded and vastly outnumbered. Surrender immediately and return to the void or face total annihilation. You have 1 hour to decide. Admiral Rodriguez's response was broadcast across all Council frequencies. His voice was calm and clear, carrying no hint of fear or doubt. Grand Admiral Fel Noth, we tried diplomacy first. You chose war instead. Now you will learn why the void feared us more than we feared it. The hour passed in tense silence. Council ships maintained their battle formations while human vessels seemed to drift casually through space, showing no signs of defensive positioning. When the deadline expired, the Council attack began with devastating force. 10,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough energy to sterilize entire worlds. The human fleet disappeared. For a moment, the Council forces thought they had won. Scanner readings showed empty space where the human ships had been. Victory announcements began spreading through the Council communications networks. Then reality began to change. The human ships reappeared, but they were not where they had been before. Some materialized inside the Council formation. Others appeared above and below the enemy fleet. A few seemed to exist in multiple locations at the same time. Dr. Susan Walsh had spent decades studying the entities humanity encountered in the void. Her research had led to weapons that operated on principles the Council could not comprehend. The first human attack targeted a Council battle group from the Hegemony fleet. Captain Rick Stone commanded a single human destroyer against 50 enemy warships. He activated a device that temporarily altered the gravitational constant in a small area of space. The Council ships, designed to operate under normal physical laws, suddenly found themselves in an environment where gravity was 1,000 times stronger than it should be. The massive vessels collapsed into tiny points of super-dense matter in seconds. 50 warships became 50 microscopic black holes before their crews could even scream. The Council forces tried to adapt. They spread their formations wider, hoping to avoid area effect weapons. They coordinated their attacks, attempting to overwhelm individual human ships with massive firepower. Nothing worked. Human vessels moved through space like living creatures, flowing around obstacles and threats with impossible grace. Their defensive systems did not just deflect incoming attacks. They converted enemy fire into energy that powered even more devastating counterattacks. Commander Nina Price demonstrated another breakthrough technology. Her ship fired weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Council shields that blocked attacks in normal space were useless against beams that struck from directions that did not exist. The psychological impact was devastating. Council crews watched their most powerful weapons pass harmlessly through human ships while their own vessels were destroyed by attacks they could not understand or defend. Against Admiral Fel Noth tried to maintain order as his fleet disintegrated around him. All ships concentrate fire on individual targets. Overwhelm their defenses with coordinated strikes. The order was sound tactical thinking, but it assumed the humans were fighting by rules the Council understood. They were not. When 100 Council ships focused their fire on a single human vessel, the target ship simply phased into a parallel dimension. The massive barrage passed through empty space while the human ship reappeared behind the attackers and destroyed them all with a single shot. Senator Veltara watched the battle from the Council Command Center on the homeworld. The tactical displays showed her worst fears coming true. The human fleet was not just winning. They were demonstrating that Council military power was completely irrelevant. "How many ships have we lost?" she asked the communications officer. Over 3,000, Senator, and we have not destroyed a single human vessel. The truth that the Council refused to accept was becoming impossible to ignore. Humanity had not just survived their exile, they had evolved beyond anything the galaxy could comprehend. During their time in the void, humans had encountered beings that existed before the universe had structure. Ancient entities that remembered when reality itself was still forming. Most species would have been driven insane by contact with such creatures. But humans were adaptable. They learned. They formed alliances with beings that treated the laws of physics as mild suggestions rather than absolute rules. Dr. Carol Evans had been humanity's lead researcher on void space phenomena. Her work had unlocked technologies that made Council science look primitive by comparison. "We did not conquer the darkness between galaxies," she had written in her final report before the return. "We became part of it, and it became part of us." The Battle of Andromeda Gateway lasted 3 hours. When it ended, less than 2,000 Council ships remained operational out of the original 10,000. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. The surviving Council forces retreated in complete disorder. Admiral Felnoth's flagship was among the few ships that escaped destruction, but he knew the war was already over. Kevin Parker was humanity's intelligence coordinator. His networks had infiltrated every level of Council society during the long years of exile. He knew that panic was spreading throughout their territory. "Admiral Carter," he reported over secure channels, "Council forces are abandoning their forward positions. 3 species have already withdrawn their fleets from Council command. The Crystalline Collective is requesting private negotiations." Lisa Carter nodded with satisfaction. The demonstration had achieved its purpose. The galaxy now understood that human demands were not requests to be negotiated. They were statements of fact to be accepted, but the Council leadership was still too proud to surrender completely. Emergency sessions were being called on every major world. Some voices called for immediate peace negotiations. Others demanded that the fight continue, even if it meant the destruction of galactic civilization. Laura Foster was monitoring Council communications from her position aboard a stealth ship that existed partially outside normal space. The debates she was hearing confirmed that the Council was fracturing under pressure. "They are scared," she reported to Admiral Carter, "but they are not ready to give up completely. Some of them still believe they can find a way to defeat us." Carter considered this information carefully. The complete destruction of the Council fleet had been intended as a lesson, not the beginning of a genocide. Humanity wanted to rule the galaxy, not burn it down. "Open a channel to the Council homeworld," she ordered. "It is time for our final offer." The message that went out to every Council world was simple and direct. Ambassador Helen Brooks delivered it personally, her image appearing on every communication screen in Council space. "The demonstration is complete. You have seen what happens when you oppose us. Now you will hear our final terms." The galaxy held its breath as humanity prepared to dictate the new order that would replace the old Council system. 800,000 years of exile were about to end, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The final terms were not what the Council expected to hear. Ambassador Helen Brooks stood before the emergency assembly of the Galactic Council. Every species representative was present, either in person or through holographic projection. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident debate was now filled with fearful whispers. "The Galactic Council is dissolved effective immediately," Brooks announced without ceremony. "All military forces will stand down and await new orders. All species will transfer governmental authority to the human hegemony within 72 hours. The silence that followed was deafening. For thousands of years, the Council had been the supreme authority in the galaxy. Now a single human woman was calmly announcing its end. Ambassador Zektar found his voice first. "You cannot simply declare our government dissolved. We represent billions of citizens across millions of worlds. What gives you the right?" Brooks smiled without warmth. "The right of superior force, Ambassador. The right earned through 800,000 years of survival in conditions that would have killed your entire species. The right of beings who have seen the birth and death of galaxies." General Paul Clark was coordinating the systematic takeover of Council authority across the galaxy. Human forces were not conquering worlds in the traditional sense. Instead, they were simply making it clear that Council rule was no longer relevant. On the fortress world of Mektalar, Colonel Nina Price arrived with a single ship and delivered a simple message to the planetary governor. This world is now under human protection. All Council military forces have 1 hour to withdraw peacefully. After that, they will be removed by other means. Governor Thecamol was a veteran of dozens of campaigns against rebellious species. He commanded a planetary defense force of 10,000 ships and a surface army of millions. His response was predictable. 1 human ship against an entire world? You must be insane. Colonel Price activated a device that her ship had been carrying since the journey from the void. The technology was based on principles learned from entities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The entire population of Mektalar, except for the Council military forces, simply vanished. Where are they? Governor Thecamol demanded, his voice rising to a scream. Safe, Price replied calmly. They exist in a parallel dimension where you cannot reach them. Surrender now and they will be returned to this reality. Refuse and spend eternity alone on an empty world. The psychological warfare was devastating. Council forces across the galaxy began to realize they were not fighting an enemy they could understand. Humans had technologies that could manipulate reality itself. Dr. Carol Evans was humanity's leading expert on void space phenomena. During the long exile, she had spent decades studying the ancient entities that lived between galaxies. Her research had unlocked secrets that made Council science look like children playing with toys. You banished us to the space between galaxies, she explained to a gathering of terrified Council scientists. Do you know what lives there? Beings that existed before your son was born. Creatures that remember when the universe was young. Things that make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The void between galaxies was supposed to be empty space. The discovery that it contained ancient intelligences changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. We did not just survive them, Evans continued. We learned from them. We formed alliances with entities that consider the laws of physics to be suggestions rather than rules. On the Council homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Gothmel made one desperate attempt to maintain some form of negotiation. What about the smaller species? The peaceful traders and farmers who never harmed humans? Would you destroy innocent civilians for our mistakes? Kevin Parker was humanity's chief negotiator for planetary surrenders. His response addressed the Chancellor's concerns while making the new reality perfectly clear. We are not monsters, Chancellor. The innocent will be protected under our rule. It is the Council leadership that we hold responsible for our unjust exile. But protection under human rule meant accepting human authority completely. There would be no negotiations, no compromises, no gradual transitions. The old order was ending immediately. Colonel Matt Sanders supervised the transition of power on the trade hub world of Velnara. The planet's economy was based on free commerce between dozens of species, and many feared that human rule would destroy their way of life. Instead, they discovered that humans were far better administrators than the Council had ever been. Your trade routes are inefficient, Sanders explained to the local merchant council. We can reduce shipping times by 60% and cut costs by half. Your profits will increase dramatically under our management. The merchants were skeptical until they saw the results. Human ships used void space technology to travel vast distances instantly. What had taken weeks under the old system now took hours. Agent Laura Foster was coordinating intelligence operations across the galaxy. Her job was to identify Council loyalists who might attempt to organize resistance movements. What she found instead was a galaxy that was rapidly accepting human rule. Most citizens discovered that life under the new system was better than anything they had experienced under the Council. Crime rates plummeted as human enforcement teams demonstrated their capabilities. Pirates who had operated with impunity for centuries found their ships converted into harmless gas clouds. Corrupt officials discovered that human technology could detect lies with perfect accuracy. On the former Council capital world, Amy Taylor was overseeing the construction of administrative centers for the new human hegemony. The buildings defied conventional architecture, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that allowed instantaneous communication across the galaxy. How is this possible? Asked the local construction supervisor, staring at walls that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. We learn from beings that do not recognize the limitations you call reality, Taylor explained. What seems impossible to you is simply another tool for us. The most surprising development was how quickly former enemies began to embrace human leadership. Species that had fought bitter wars against each other for millennia found themselves working together under human administration. Dr. Betty Russell was documenting the transformation for historical records. "The Council maintained order through fear and oppression," she wrote. "Humans maintain order through competence and fairness. The difference is remarkable." Within 6 months of the takeover, even the most stubborn Council loyalists had to admit that the galaxy was more prosperous and peaceful than it had been in living memory. Trade flourished, conflicts ended, and technological advancement accelerated beyond anything seen in recorded history. Admiral Jake Morrison, now serving as governor of the outer sectors, often reflected on humanity's journey from exile to rule. "They wanted us gone because we were dangerous," he told his staff during a planning meeting. They never considered that danger, properly directed, might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The transformation was not without resistance. Small groups of Council hardliners attempted to organize rebellions on remote worlds. Their efforts were quickly and efficiently crushed by human forces that seemed to know about their plans before they were even made. The few remaining Council leaders who refused to accept the new order found themselves facing a chilling reality. Their own people preferred human rule to the chaos and corruption of the old system. President Chris Murphy addressed the galaxy from the new capital on Nova, Terra. His message was broadcast to every world simultaneously through dimensional communication networks that made the old Council systems look primitive. "We did not return for revenge, though justice was necessary. We came back to fix what the Council had broken, a galaxy divided by fear, prejudice, and inefficient leadership." The irony was not lost on anyone who understood the history. The species the Council had exiled for being too violent had returned as the most effective peacekeepers the galaxy had ever known. 800,000 years of exile were over. The age of human rule had begun, and across the galaxy the same truth echoed on every world. The Council should have left well enough alone. 10 years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was unrecognizable from what it had been before. Director Matt Sanders stood on the observation deck of Nova Terra Station, watching ships from 100 different species dock peacefully at the massive trade hub. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering, existing partially in normal space and partially in void dimensions that allowed it to serve worlds across the entire galaxy simultaneously. Below him, representatives from former enemy species worked side by side, coordinating trade routes and settling disputes through the efficient human administrative system. What had once taken months of bureaucratic delays now happened in hours. "Daily report, sir," his aide announced, handing him a data pad. "Crime in the outer sectors down another 2%. Trade volume up 15% from last month. 0 military conflicts reported anywhere in the galaxy." Sanders nodded with satisfaction. The numbers told the story that even former Council loyalists could no longer deny. The galaxy was more prosperous, more peaceful, and more united than it had been in millions of years. The transformation had not happened overnight. In the first months after the takeover, many species had feared that human rule would be harsh and oppressive. They expected the same authoritarian control the Council had exercised, only with different masters. Instead, they discovered something unprecedented in galactic history: competent leadership. Commander Amy Taylor oversaw civilian relations on the former Council homeworld. Her job was to help the transition from the old system to the new one. But she found that most citizens needed little convincing. "The difference is remarkable," she explained to a group of visiting diplomats from the Outer Rim. Under the Council, simple trade licenses took months to process and required bribes to a dozen different officials. Under our system, the same license is approved automatically within minutes if all requirements are met. The secret was humanity's alliance with the void entities. These ancient beings, grateful for humanity's companionship during the lonely millennia of exile, had shared knowledge that transformed civilization itself. Dr. Carol Evans had become the galaxy's leading expert on dimensional science. Her research centers on Nova Terra were developing technologies that seemed like magic to species that still thought in terms of conventional physics. "We can create matter from empty space," she demonstrated to a group of amazed scientists. "We can travel instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy, We can even manipulate time itself in small areas. These are not miracles. They are simply applications of principles we learned in the dark. The economic benefits were staggering. Transportation costs had dropped to almost nothing using void space travel. Communication delays were eliminated through dimensional networks. Resource scarcity became a thing of the past when matter could be created directly from energy. But the most impressive change was in how conflicts were resolved. Captain Dan Mitchell commanded one of the human peacekeeping squadrons that patrolled the galaxy. His job was to respond to disputes between species and prevent them from escalating into wars. The old council approach had been to impose solutions through military force. The human approach was more elegant. "We do not tell species what to do," Mitchell explained to his team during a training session. "We simply remove their ability to harm each other while they work out their problems themselves." When territorial disputes arose, human ships would create dimensional barriers that made violence impossible, while still allowing normal commerce and communication. When trade disagreements threatened to become wars, human mediators used technology that could detect lies and hidden motives with perfect accuracy. The result was that conflicts were resolved quickly and fairly, with both sides usually satisfied with the outcome. Admiral Lisa Carter had become the supreme commander of all human forces, but she found her job becoming easier each year. Military interventions were increasingly rare as species learned to work within the new system. "We barely need to fire a shot anymore," she reported to President Murphy during their monthly briefing. "Most problems are solved by simply showing up. Our reputation has become our most effective weapon." The reputation was well earned. In the early years after the takeover, a few species had attempted to test human resolve. The results had been swift and decisive. When the hegemony remnant tried to organize a rebellion on 3 rim worlds, human forces had simply relocated the rebel leaders to a pocket dimension where time moved differently. To the rebels, they spent years in isolation contemplating their choices. To the rest of the galaxy, they were gone for exactly 1 hour before being returned with completely changed attitudes. When pirate fleets from the old Chaos Zones attempted to raid peaceful traders, human patrol ships converted their weapons into flower petals, and their hull plating into transparent crystal. The pirates found themselves drifting helplessly in beautiful but harmless ships, while human forces escorted them to rehabilitation centers. The psychological impact was profound. Species across the galaxy began to understand that human power was not based on superior weapons or larger fleets. It was based on a fundamental mastery of reality itself. President Chris Murphy governed the human hegemony from the new capital city on Nova Terra. The city itself was an architectural wonder, with buildings that existed in multiple dimensions and parks that contained ecosystems from thousands of different worlds. "We rule not through fear, but through competence," he often said in his addresses to the galaxy. "We maintain order not through oppression, but through making order more beneficial than chaos." The old council system had relied on complexity and bureaucracy to maintain control. Citizens spent so much time navigating paperwork and regulations that they had little energy left for rebellion. The human system was the opposite. Governance was simple, efficient, and transparent. Citizens could access any government service instantly through dimensional networks. Appeals and complaints were processed immediately by human administrators who could detect fraud and assess validity with perfect accuracy. Dr. Betty Russell continued her work documenting the transformation for future historians. Her reports painted a picture of a galaxy that had been fundamentally improved by human leadership. "Population growth is at healthy levels for the first time in millennia," she wrote. "Species that were on the verge of extinction under council neglect are now thriving. Technological advancement has accelerated beyond our ability to measure it. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in how different species related to each other. Under the council, species had been kept separate and suspicious, with complex alliance networks that shifted constantly based on temporary interests. Competition and conflict had been the norm. Under human rule, cooperation became the standard. Species discovered that they achieved more by working together than by competing against each other. Jake Morrison, now serving as ambassador to the Outer Rim species, watched with amazement as former enemies collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. The Crystalline Collective and the Hegemony Remnant are building a joint research station, he reported to Admiral Carter. 6 months ago, they were trying to annihilate each other. Now they are sharing their most advanced technologies. The transformation extended beyond politics and economics. The galaxy was experiencing a cultural renaissance as species shared their art, music, and literature through the new dimensional networks. Festivals celebrating the diversity of galactic civilization were held regularly on hundreds of worlds. Human administrators ensured that every species had opportunities to showcase their unique contributions to the greater galactic community. Laura Foster had transitioned from intelligence work to cultural exchange programs. Her job was to help species learn from each other while maintaining their individual identities. "We are not trying to create a single galactic culture," she explained to a gathering of artists and scholars. "We want 1,000 different cultures that can appreciate and learn from each other." The success of the human system had even won over the few remaining council hardliners. Former Ambassador Zektar, who had once mocked humanity's return, now served as an advisor to the human administration. "I was wrong," he admitted in a public address that was broadcast across the galaxy. "I believed the Council's propaganda about human violence and unpredictability. I did not understand that those same qualities, properly channeled, would make them the most effective leaders we had ever seen." The final vindication of human rule came from an unexpected source. Deep space monitors detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. Another galaxy was attempting to make contact, having observed the transformation of what they called the chaotic spiral arm into something resembling actual civilization. Admiral Carter smiled as she read the first contact reports. "They want to know how we brought peace to an entire galaxy. Should we tell them it just took the right species in charge?" President Murphy considered the question carefully. First contact with another galaxy was a momentous occasion, one that would define humanity's role in the larger universe. "Tell them the truth," he finally decided. "Sometimes the most dangerous species makes the best peacekeepers. Sometimes the ones everyone fears are exactly what everyone needs."